Today, I'm gonna pit the new LG G3 MLA OLED against two of last year's QD-OLED TVs. What can we learn from this? Maybe more than you think. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is one of several comparisons that I've been very excited to make this year. Looking forward, I will be comparing the new LG G3 MLA OLED against the latest batch of QD-OLED TVs from Samsung and Sony. But right now, I want to pit this fancy new MLA OLED of LG's against last year's QD-OLEDs because, well, it's hard not to see LG's MLA technology for its WOLED TVs as a clap back at all the hype that we gave QD-OLED TVs last year. There's a bit of history there that we need to explore. I have some things to answer for, and I also think we need to talk about whether LG has maxed out WOLED technology or if it might have some other tricks up its sleeve, because ultimately, we have to talk about whether this is the year to pull the trigger on a super premium TV, or, do you wait another entire year? I cannot wait to get into this. And if you're feeling even a fraction of the excitement I am about this, please let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, please consider clicking some buttons of support, which could include one of our shopping links to the TVs you see in this video at their best price. That does a lot to support the work on this channel, and I can't thank you enough for even considering it. Okay, let's dig in. So let's rewind a little and review some stuff that a younger, slightly less experienced Caleb had to say as he peered into his crystal ball last year. Remember when QD-OLED first came out? I knew it was gonna be good, and it was hard not to see its existence as a big deal because Samsung had spent so much time downplaying OLED in favor of QLED that it took eating a big slice of humble pie to put out an OLED-based TV. For a while there, we weren't sure if the S95B that you see here was even gonna be a thing. Sony actually announced and produced the first QD-OLED TV based on Samsung Display's tech, while Samsung Electronics ironed out a good marketing message. But in the end, we got two really amazing QD-OLED TVs, the Samsung S95B and the Sony A95K, both of which you'll see in this video. They got a bit brighter than LG's OLED TVs at the time, and the color purity and color brightness was unlike anything we'd seen in a consumer TV before. All of this led me to examine whether LG's proverbial goose might be cooked in a video I titled, "Should LG Be Worried About QD-OLED?" And while I do think LG had a little bit to be concerned about in terms of all the attention that QD-OLED was getting and continues to get, I ultimately said in that video that LG's OLED TVs would continue to be popular, reliable, and possibly very appealing despite all the claps of thunder being generated by QD-OLED. And then, well, MLA, or Micro Lens Array, happened. And before I go further, just a quick recap on MLA technology for anyone who may not be up to speed. Micro Lens Array refers to a thin layer in LG's OLED panels, which serves to take light that was previously lost inside the panel and focus it out to the viewer. So LG hasn't created a new OLED panel here per se. They just took the latest and greatest one they had and optimized it, made it more efficient to get better, brighter results from it. And those results are astonishing, as I've described in my review. I love the LG G3 very, very much. But doesn't it seem super convenient that LG had that tech just on tap? We know that LG Display is constantly playing around with new technologies, and some of those get implemented into TVs when LG Electronics decides it's ready. Might sit on the shelf for a couple of years. But MLA, that is a technology that spent no years on the shelf before LG decided to put it into a TV, and I think that's because LG knew it needed to clap back at QD-OLED technology. A lot of clapping in this video, I've noticed. I need new words. Please send new words. Anyway, I think it was a smart move by LG because here I am talking about the G3 and comparing it to QD-OLED technology. I have more to say about that whole thing, but probably should get on with the comparison, right? Okay, each of these TVs is in the filmmaker mode picture preset, both for SDR and HDR, and each has received a calibration so that they adhere to an industry standard D65 white point. That means both TVs could look much brighter with the much colder color temperatures that you'd get in standard or vivid, but we're gonna level the playing field here. The source for most of this comparison is the brand new, soon-to-be released Spears and Munsell disc collection, which has a bunch of new test patterns, but also has a few new pieces of demo footage. I'm gonna primarily be using the 2000 nit BT 2020 content to show what differences in brightness and color might be happening between these TVs. Now, having measured these TVs, we already know that on paper, the LG G3 is capable of getting brighter than the 2022 QD-OLEDs. That's the benefit of the MLA technology, plus a little help from the white subpixel, hence WOLED. The W stands for white, even though in this context, it could also stand for winning the brightness war. The QD-OLEDs top out at about 1,000 nits, while the LG G3 here tops out at about 1,500 nits. And that sounds like a lot, right? 500 more nits, or 50% brighter, right? Well, not exactly. If all we were doing was watching white squares, yes, that would mathematically be true. But when we mix in color, we have to change the calculus. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. Let's just look at the TVs doing what they're doing. And I have to say that having watched these TVs side by side, my first impression is not around a brightness difference. Honestly, the tint difference is what gets me, and it always has. Like, LGs have always had a more greenish tint, while the QD-OLEDs have a more magenta vibe. When comparing side by side, it's hard to get past that, but we have to get past that, because when you don't see these TVs side by side, you're not very aware of one having any particular kind of tint leaning this way or that. You really aren't. At least most people aren't, myself included, and I do this for a living. Once I get past the tint thing though, I am honestly surprised at how infrequently I perceive the LG G3's superior brightness. I mean, there are moments for sure, but in HDR, the highlights on the LG G3 don't really look much brighter than the QD-OLED's rendering of those same highlights. No, it's really in the average picture level, or overall brightness, that we see the most difference. When we have a generally bright image on the screen, like this snow-filled image for instance, we can see the LG G3 flexing its muscles a bit. It's got an edge in scenes that tend to have a lot of white in them. And that white subpixel gives the impression of brighter colors too, which brings in the whole color purity at higher color luminance conversation. Because the QD-OLED TVs are able to maintain color purity at high luminance levels, that is, the red, green, and blue color primaries are more accurate at higher brightness levels, the QD-OLED is able to do some things that even the LG G3 can't. And if you have the two TVs side by side like this, you can see those differences. It's most obvious for me in the reds and oranges, and by extension, some in the yellows. Those colors are brighter to me on the QD-OLED, and when we measure them, our subjective observations are ratified by objective ones. But is that something that most viewers can see outside of a comparison like this? Which brings me to possibly the most important part of this video. And this is a subject I've brought up before, but I'm gonna have to thump on this all year long, I think. This is what informs the takeaway I'm gonna give you in this video. When the margins of difference between two things are really wide, when something is especially good or especially poor, it's easy for us to recognize those things without a point of reference. For example, I might show you a picture of a strawberry. You know that strawberry should be red. So if that strawberry looks pinker than it should, or maybe more orange than it should, you'll probably be able to tell without looking at a picture of what the strawberry should definitely look like. But if I show you a picture of a strawberry that looks very good, you register it as looking like it's got the right hue of red and the right brightness, it looks appetizing. No red flags that anything is wrong. It just looks great. Well, then you would have a hard time determining if it was correct or just slightly off with no frame of reference or anything else to compare it to. I'd say you might have a 50-50 chance of getting the answer right. These strawberries look amazing. These red flowers, and also the yellow one, they look great. I love the way these images look, but are they correct? Are they the best they can be? Kind of hard to know until we bring in a comparison, a visual frame of reference. And then all of a sudden it's super easy to see, sure. And this is true in audio as well. A drummer's ride cymbal may sound pretty bad on a certain set of speakers, or with a certain amp or preamp, or on a certain set of headphones. And that's because something in the chain is doing a poor job, and it's easy to hear that. But if it sounds great, do you also wonder if it's correct or as great as it could be? Some of us do, But unless you have access to the mastering tapes and totally linear equipment, or better yet, measuring gear, it's hard to know for sure. In other words, it's easier to sense from bad to good than it is to sense the margin from great to excellent. I had a person come in here, look at these two TVs and declare the one on the right is superior. But what was that based on? His personal preference on a short clip he saw? I know that if I showed him just the TV on the left with a variety of clips, he'd love the TV because it's objectively awesome. And if I pointed out that strawberries, the red flowers, he'd see they were better on the TV on the left. But all he saw in that moment was this frog, which looks better on the LG, and this other scene where the LG has a little bit of an edge. So my takeaway is coming up next, but before I get to that, I did want to point out one more thing I think is interesting on these TVs. The auto brightness limiter, or more specifically, the dimming protection these TVs engage to stave off burn-in risk. What I noticed on the LG G3 is that if the image is static, like we pause the disc here, it'll start to dim a little at about 4 minutes, and then it just gets really dim after like 5 minutes or so. Whereas with the Samsung QD-OLED, at least, that doesn't change much in that time frame. However, if the image has static elements combined with motion, the LG G3 will stay bright, while the Samsung QD-OLED will eventually dim, although it takes a long time for it to do so. Now, I've personally not had trouble with auto brightness limiter, or ABL, in my general viewing experience, but some folks say it drives them nuts. I don't know what kind of viewing scenario triggers this annoyance. I think someone sent me a specific example once and I lost it. I'm sure you'll be hitting me in the comments with your experiences, and I look forward to reading them and trying to reproduce them. But it's hard for me to say there's an advantage between one TV and another based on my personal experience. More gaming-centric channels might have more valuable info for you on that front. But there is no way I can get out of this video without talking about burn-in risk. I mean, many of you probably know that Ratings.com is conducting a test involving these very same TVs, and that both of the QD-OLEDs have shown burn-in, whereas the LG G3 has not, given the same conditions. But folks, just a reminder that what Ratings.com is doing is a torture test. My advice about avoiding burn-in risk remains the same. If you watch hours and hours of that kind of content every day, then an OLED may not be for you. But it seems clear so far, at least, that a 2023 LG G3 OLED might be at lower risk than a 2022 QD OLED. And that's about as far as I'm willing to take it. Time will tell if QD OLEDs end up showing burn-in problems for a broad base of customers. And I think we're still like at least a year or maybe even 2 from getting some really good data on that. So ultimately, my takeaway is this. The G3 represents a remarkable advancement from LG. It stands toe-to-toe with the 2022 QD OLEDs, slimming the margins between the two so much that I have a hard time saying that one TV is categorically better than another. There are differences between the two. The LG G3 is better at overall luminance or brightness, while the QD OLED models put out brighter colors in some cases. They each come out of black a little differently, so there's some subtle differences in shadow detail. The LG has better low luminance color, although I'm not sure how valuable that is to most folks. And then there are a bunch of considerations that have nothing to do with picture quality that might weigh in how you factor which is the best TV. But based on picture quality alone, after watching these TVs myself and showing them to a bunch of other folks in our office, my thinking is that so long as you can still get a 2022 QD OLED, that will give you ultra premium picture quality for less money than the brand new 2023 LG G3 will cost you. Because the picture quality is so close, you'd be hard pressed to see a difference between the two unless they were stacked side by side like this. But that advice is only valid for as long as 2022 QD OLEDs are around. Eventually, we will have to compare the LG G3 to the 2023 QD OLEDs because the 2022 models will be gone. And believe me, I cannot wait to do exactly that. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. If you've stuck with me this long, please do me a solid and let me know if you like this content and want to see more, or if you didn't and want me to just shove it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.